Look at your skin right now. If you have a birthmark that follows a line down your side, your cells may have split into two different genetic populations before you were even born. If you have a large patch that covers exactly one half of your face, your body could be telling a story that starts before your first heartbeat. And if you have a series of marks that curve along your torso like a stripe, that pattern isn't random. It's a map. And most people never learn how to read it. Here's what almost nobody talks about. Birthmarks get dismissed. You're born with a spot, a doctor glances at it, says it's benign, and that's the end of the conversation. And look, for the vast majority of people, that's exactly right. Most birthmarks are completely harmless. A flat brown cafe au lait spot on your arm, a small strawberry patch behind your ear, a pale area on your lower back, these are incredibly common. Millions of people have them and live their entire lives without a single complication. This video is not about those. This is about something rarer. Something that happens when a birthmark isn't just a birthmark, when its location, its shape, or the pattern it forms across your body is actually reflecting something that happened at the cellular level before you took your first breath. And once you understand what to look for, you'll never look at skin the same way again. So what's the difference between an ordinary birthmark and one that might mean something more? It comes down to pattern, an isolated spot sitting anywhere on your body with no particular structure around it. That's typical. But when marks begin to follow lines, when they segment the body in a way that mirrors how cells divided and migrated during fetal development, that's when the picture changes. Doctors have a name for those lines. They're called Blaschko's lines, and they're invisible on normal skin. They trace the paths that skin cells traveled as they multiplied and spread across a developing embryo. You can't see them on most people, but in some individuals, pigmentation follows those exact paths, revealing a hidden map that was always there beneath the surface. The reason this happens connects to a phenomenon called genetic mosaicism. Here's the core idea. Your body is built from trillions of cells, and every one of them is supposed to carry the same genetic instruction set. But sometimes, very early in development, a single cell undergoes a mutation. Then that cell divides. And divides again, and every cell it produces carries that same change. So instead of one uniform genetic population, your body ends up with two. Some cells carrying the original instructions, others carrying the altered version. Mosaic. Like a tile floor with two different colors laid down according to the pattern of how cells originally spread through the developing body. That's why the location matters so much. A birthmark caused by mosaicism doesn't show up randomly. It follows the territory where those altered cells landed during development, which means it can follow Blaschko's lines. It can affect one entire side of the body. It can appear in a segment that maps directly to a nerve region or a skin zone that was colonized by one particular line of cells. The mark is visible, but what it's pointing to is structural, written into the body at a level far deeper than skin. This is exactly why certain locations put doctors on alert. A birthmark along the spine can sometimes sit above a spinal cord abnormality that has no other outward symptoms. A mark on the face, particularly around the eye or along the upper cheek, may in rare cases connect to changes in the tissue underneath. The blood vessels, the nerves, the structures of the brain. A large pigmented region that covers a significant portion of the trunk can occasionally be associated with changes in nearby tissue. None of these things are certain. None of them mean that if you have a birthmark in these spots, something is automatically wrong. But they are the reason that trained physicians look at more than just the color of a mark. They look at where it is, how it's shaped, whether it follows a pattern, whether it respects the body's hidden lines, or crosses them in a way that suggests something deeper is organized the same way. And that raises the question sitting at the center of everything that follows. If some birthmarks are just birthmarks, and some are visible echoes of a genetic split that happened in the first days of your existence, how do you tell the difference? What are the actual visible clues that make a birthmark worth a closer look? Not something to panic over, not something to diagnose yourself with, but something to notice, something to mention, something to understand, because your skin has been showing you information your entire life, and most people never get the chance to decode it. The answer comes down to a handful of specific patterns, and once you see them, they're impossible to unsee. So what are those patterns? Let's be specific. because this is where things get real. The first thing to watch is growth. A birthmark that has been stable your entire life and then suddenly begins expanding, thickening, or changing texture, that gets attention. Not because change is automatically dangerous, but because change is information. A mark that was flat and is now raised. A surface that was smooth and is now rough or nodular. These are signals your skin is sending, and they're worth documenting the moment you notice them. The second is asymmetry combined with irregular borders. A mark that doesn't mirror itself, that bleeds into uneven edges, that seems to have no clear boundary. That's different from a clean, well-defined patch that's been sitting in the same spot since birth. And color variation matters too. A single mark showing multiple shades, brown, black, red, and white within the same region, tells a different story than one consistent tone. Then there's distribution. Multiple marks appearing together, especially when they seem to follow a line or segment of the body rather than sitting randomly, changes the picture entirely. One cafe au lait spot on your forearm means very little. 6 or more, scattered but following a pattern, can in rare cases point to a condition like neurofibromatosis. One vascular patch on your face is usually nothing more than a birthmark. But when that patch covers an area that maps to a specific nerve distribution, around one eye across one cheek, doctors sometimes want to look further. And pain or neurological symptoms connected to a mark's location, that's something to mention every single time, without hesitation. Now here are the patterns that have actual names attached to them. Segmental pigment changes, meaning one large region of skin that is either lighter or darker than everything around it, following the contours of Blaschko's lines, are a visible sign of mosaicism in pigment-producing cells. In some individuals, this appears as a condition called hypomelanosis of Ito, or linear and whorled nevoid hypermelanosis. These aren't household names, but dermatologists recognize them immediately, and their presence sometimes prompts a deeper look at the nervous system, because the same mosaic process that affected skin cells can occasionally affect cells elsewhere in the body that developed at the same time. Vascular birthmarks in certain locations carry their own significance. A large port wine stain, that deep reddish-purple flat mark, occurring on the face near the eye or forehead, is sometimes associated with a rare condition called Sturge-Weber syndrome, which can involve blood vessel changes in the brain. Again, not always. Not even usually. But the location is enough to warrant an evaluation that goes beyond the surface. Congenital melanocytic nevi, the large dark pigmented marks present from birth, especially when they're substantial in size or appear in what doctors call a bathing trunk distribution across the lower back and upper legs, carry a small but real association with a condition called neurocutaneous melanosis, where pigment cells also develop in the central nervous system. That's why large nevi in those specific regions sometimes lead to MRI imaging even when nothing else seems wrong. And this brings up the most important point of all. You cannot diagnose any of this from a photo. You cannot type your birthmark's location into a search engine and come out the other side knowing whether you have a genetic syndrome. Online self-diagnosis in this space is genuinely unreliable because the appearance of a mark alone, its color, its rough size as you eyeball it in a mirror, cannot confirm or rule out a syndrome. Two marks can look nearly identical and have completely different causes. What matters is the full picture: location, distribution, associated symptoms, family history, sometimes microscopic tissue analysis, sometimes imaging. What a real evaluation looks like depends on what's being considered. A dermatologist typically starts with a thorough visual and dermoscopic examination, sometimes a biopsy if tissue changes are present. Depending on what they find, that can lead to ophthalmology. Because eyes share developmental origins with skin and brain tissue, and changes in one can sometimes signal changes in another. It can lead to neurology if there are symptoms involving headaches, seizures, or developmental concerns. And in some cases, particularly when a pattern strongly suggests mosaicism, genetic testing can identify the underlying cell population carrying the variant. So here's the practical guidance. Take a photo of any birthmark that feels unfamiliar to you and take another one 6 months later. Stable marks that haven't changed over years are almost always benign, but document. Note whether a mark has any symptoms: itching, pain, tenderness. Note whether there are others nearby that seem to follow a pattern. And if you have a birthmark in an unusual location, along your spine, covering a significant portion of your face, following a curved line down your trunk, or appearing in a segmented half-body distribution, bring it up with a dermatologist. Not because you should be afraid, because information that's already written on your skin deserves to be read by someone who knows the language. Your skin has been keeping this record since before you were born. The marks you have, the patterns they form, the territory they cover, none of it is random. Most of it means nothing beyond a quirk of pigmentation. But some of it is pointing to something deeper, and the only way to know the difference is to ask someone who can actually look,